Severed Steel came out a few weeks ago on Steam. After playing its demo during the Realms Deep 2021 showcase, it instantly shot up to being one of my most anticipated games of this year. The demo showed just how addictive the core gameplay loop was and how tight the level design and controls were. The demo also showed that gameplay was going to be the game's main priority, and true to that demo, in the full release, the story is basically non-existent and just window dressing to move the game forward. And when your core loop is this good and this fun to play, it's hard not to get excited about playing it. I really hate to open the video with this, but it's the biggest elephant in the room when talking about this game, and many others share this sentiment. And like what I plan to do with this video, recommending people buy this game, they should know what they're getting into and for how much. The game is going for $25 on Steam, and honestly, I think the average person who would buy this game is going to see that as $5 to $10 too much, especially when I beat the game in 2.9 hours, and an hour of that was stuck on the worst level in the game, but we'll get into that later. What a game's worth in dollars is super subjective, and there's honestly no right answer, but in the game's current form, I do think it is slightly much. It sucks to say because the developer seems really passionate about this and is responding to people fast and regularly on the Steam forums, which makes them braver than any US Marine and have a better mental fortitude than even the most seasoned psychiatrist. They mentioned in a post on the game's Steam page how they plan to add some more to the campaign in an update later this year, and as I'm about to get into, I think in the long run, the price of admission will be worth it. But if you're someone who's tight on cash and is really careful with what they buy for games, I think that you probably should wait for a sale, or wait for these updates where the game has more content. If it hasn't been obvious enough from the footage shown up until now, I am fucking bad at this game. I was actually doing way better in the demo, but I don't know what changed with me since the span of the 2 months, but I am so fucking shit at it. The game naturally pushes you to want to master its movement so you can do cool trick shots and clip them to show off to your friends. At least that's what it did for me. Your movement options in this game are a double jump, slide or dive kick when in the air, wall running, and a John Woo table hopping dive. Any game that puts action movie stunts in it as movement options is based in my book. You regen health and gain more meter for your bullet time from killing enemies, which is a great incentive to keep the flow of combat alive. It doesn't mean you can play completely mindlessly, but it does allow you to run into crowds of gunfire without having to worry too much about being melted. Most of the guns in the game have pretty small ammo counts, resulting in you constantly swapping between all the guns the game has to offer. To further incentivize the run and gun gameplay, without compromising the flow of combat, when your gun is out of ammo or you have none in your hand, any loaded gun will magnetize to your hand when passing by them, meaning that you don't have to stop fighting, look down, and pick up a weapon on the ground. You can still do that if you want to, and there's a toggle in the options menu to make it so they don't automatically magnetize, but honestly I find it perfect as is. It keeps the game flow in a constant perpetual motion and also keeps you having to adapt to whatever gun you might get next because it's not completely random, but you never know what weapon is going to fly into your hands next. The game comes with a level editor and workshop integration, so getting new levels should be a breeze, and if there's community interest in the game, there will be content for this game as long as people care about it. Now, after playing the campaign, I think there is a clear line between what makes a good level in this game and what makes a really bad level. The best levels are ones that have enough open spaces that it doesn't feel claustrophobic trying to fight hordes of dudes in narrow hallways, but also not being completely barren that there is no cover for you and it's just an empty warehouse shooting gallery for your enemies while you try to scrounge around for a gun to actually fight them. There is a happy middle ground like the office building levels, where there is plenty of cover but is open enough that you could wall run with ease while you're trying to use your Mega Man Buster shot to break through walls since all the environments are completely destructible. The worst levels in this game are ones that shift your focus away from the game's core loop to do something that's not really that fun. There are 3 levels that I think are really bad, and a 4th one that is somewhat unenjoyable but suffers from the narrow design like I mentioned a minute ago. That level is the train mission where you have to get to the front of these 2 trains and it's just really awkward to fight in a bunch of these cabs. They run between empty boxes with windows that leave you open to being sniped from the other train parallel to you, to other cabs being filled with clutter, making it awkward to aim and actually combat enemies. One of the bad 3 levels has a neat concept but just left me kind of frustrated and actually broke on me. You need to get to the top of this cylindrical tower, and to do that you need to power up this fan and get to these little huts which have switches to further power it up. The first time through, about halfway the game bugged on me and it wouldn't activate the switch no matter how many times I stepped on it, so I couldn't couldn't get to the next hut since the turbine didn't have enough power to lift me higher. When it finally worked after a reload, it was the least offensive of these three I mentioned, but it just wasn't very fun fumbling with the wind physics while being shot at by a ton of guys in these little huts. What's really unfortunate about the next two levels that I think are the worst is that they are sadly the last two levels of the campaign. The game loses all momentum and goes out on a whimpering fart. The second to last level is the reason why my playthrough is 2.9 hours instead of 80 minutes, because I was stuck on it for an hour. Your main objective is to burn down this mansion with a flamethrower. You have a meter to fill before the game says you've done enough damage, and it's like pulling teeth. So firstly, the main objective takes way too long and is boring as hell to do, again distracting you from the good aspect of this game that is the movement and core gameplay loop to douse walls in flames until the game is satisfied. The mansion is a combination of hallways that are too narrow and spots that are too open that you find yourself getting shot from a range that is out of your reach if you are using the flamethrower. Since you can only carry one weapon at a time, you constantly have to swap between destroying the house and fighting the never-ending spawning enemies. You either have to waste your flamethrower fuel or drop it and use another gun, which makes it hard to keep track of where you dropped it in the ocean of dead bodies and debris. If dividing your attention between the objective and the overly spawning enemies wasn't enough, the flamethrower is easily the worst feeling weapon in the game. There is sometimes this really weird delay of 2 seconds where you could be hitting someone with a flamethrower, but they don't react to it at all or take any damage. It's the worst because it's so inconsistent. Sometimes you just swing around the room with your flamethrower active and enemies will instantly die, while the same enemies in a different attempt at the level will take seconds to react to being cooked by your gun 10 inches in front of their face. Maybe some of the annoyance of this level could have been alleviated if the flamethrower had infinite ammo and it just needed to cool down and recharge, because once you are out of ammo you need to get a new flamethrower from the flamethrower enemies, and the only way to damage and kill them is hitting their fuel tanks on their back. And with how I talked about it earlier, being awkward to fight enemies in these narrow hallways, it's even worse when you're fighting an enemy you can't see because they're shooting fire at you and you can't seem to damage them from the front at all. And since the entire level is destructible, it is very easy to get caught in these tiny floating pieces of wall that persist, which results in you dying. And after a while, it's impossible to see through these balls of fire left by your damage to the house, resulting in even more cheap shots and deaths. And if there was one thing that this game needed changed in an update, it's the ability to turn off the jelly on your screen when you're at the lowest amount of health, without also turning off the indicator for what direction you're being shot from, because it just makes it completely incomprehensible in some areas to what you're looking at. I would much rather have a sound effect to notify me that my health is low. And even after you spend 20 minutes burning enough of the house down for the game to be happy while trying not to die or get caught with your pants down with 1 HP with a weapon that has shit range and inconsistent damage, the game doesn't give you a checkpoint for the second objective. So you could have just struggled to barely deal enough damage to the house only for it to tell you to kill the rest of the enemies in it and then die to a cheap shot and have to do the entire thing over again. This level honestly really soured my experience with the game, and you could chalk some of this up to salty ranting from someone who is not very good at the game, but also I think it shows that how much of this game lives and dies by how much fun you're having with that core loop I keep mentioning, because outside of it, the game doesn't really have anything. It's a simple idea executed flawlessly 90% of the time, but that 10% where it doesn't hurts the game so much. The final level just doesn't really feel like a final level. Your buster is turbocharged now and it shoots a beam for several seconds, which is cool, but for some reason it had no sound effect for me, which I assume is a bug, but it just made it feel really limp when the sound design for the guns of this game is really crunchy and satisfying. The level itself is these really large, empty warehouses that have you blast through these holes to escape, and it should feel really bombastic as the final moment of fighting for your freedom, but the game just fell apart for me. The music isn't hype enough or adrenaline rushing, the lack of feedback from the cannon made it feel like a super soaker, and it's just a chore to blast through these walls multiple times. Fighting the enemies in this level didn't really feel fun since the middle of the room is completely empty and there's only these catwalks in the top corners. You make your way through the final wall and enter this white door, and the game just ends. I couldn't help while watching the credits think to myself, man, the demo had the best levels probably in the entire game, and it ends off on this really weak dud. But that's not all the game has to offer. There is a Firefight mode, which is where I think the game really shines. This is where the user-created levels get put to use. It's a trial mode where you play through levels of the campaign with weapons of your choice and modifiers like big head mode or melee only to really spice up these encounters. It's your Bloody Palace equivalent where you could sink endless amounts of hours into, and where I hope the developers put a lot of focus on with this future update they talked about. Like I said at the beginning of this video, if you're tight on money or conscious of what you buy, probably wait for a sale or the content update. If not, I absolutely recommend playing this because it is incredibly fun in spite of its few flaws. I'm glad we're starting to see games like this again. It feels like we're getting back to the glory days of the PlayStation 2, where there are games that aren't the craziest and the most content-rich from just a basic story perspective or a checklist of content. They're games focused around just being fun to play, and that is where the replay value is. It's that AA middle-of-the-shelf game you see at the store as a kid and you get your parents to buy and you fall in love with it. There's something really charming and heartwarming about these types of games that I love, and this absolutely nails it, and you should check it out. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. If you've really liked the video, please pass it around. Maybe leave a like and a comment to keep engagement up. And if you really like the channel, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. All patrons get access to videos a day early, and I have a new $7 tier where you can see rough cuts and behind the scenes stuff for new videos. There wasn't one for this video since I made it really short and in a single day, so there wasn't really much to show about the making of this video because it didn't really take a lot of work. But now I'm going to shout out my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Bully, Akita Fishkiyama, Lucy the Fox, Bluntman 4200, Elliot Morton, Lotto, Nathan Redding, Papaya-chan, Slemf Tingle, Ben Johnson, Chichometrius, Dusty the Zombie, Ekfrazo, Filthy Finger 69, Fish Kami, Joshua DiLarino, Justin Collini, Kevin Velasquez, Elliot Morton, Nicholas Pedinato, Onion Girl, Poke Joke S, Quartz, Ruben Rodriguez, Star Fox, Some Panda, the FOE3, The Unthinkable, and William Moore. Thanks so much, guys. As for what's coming next, I'm not really sure. Like I mentioned in the past few videos, I'm really focusing on short videos that I could get out because I really don't have the time to work on super long videos in the coming weeks due to some IRL obligations. Either way, whatever comes next, I hope you enjoy, and as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.